Welcome to the Fight Podcast with Jake and Nicci Hamilton,
where we discuss the complexities of marriage and manhood through real, raw, personal stories. All right, so Jake, you have been gone, traveling.
Since you've been gone.
For 2 weeks, which I have to say was normal in the past, but COVID totally stopped that. And now...
Did I do a lot of 2-week trips before that? Like, was that normal?
Yeah.
Really?
I think so. You don't think so?
I don't think
2 weeks feels really
trips.
long. You were just gone for 2 weeks, kind of felt like a month. And that is because you were gone for a lot of weekends, home for 3 or 4 days, and then gone again for a weekend, home for 3 or 4 days, and then gone again for 2 weeks. So it feels like you have been gone for about a month.
Yeah, it's been traveling since February. Because we
Right.
usually take off December, January, and most of February.
You were in Germany.
Yep.
Now, what's strange about it is prior to COVID, maybe, because that was essentially 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I feel like when you would take a long trip like this, you would come home and it was so rough for me. It would take a long time for us to reconnect.
Yeah, there was
statement?
like a rule. I think we actually discussed it a few times. There's like a rule that it was a 3-day period of like reintegration.
A 3-day Nicci grace period.
Yes, it was a reintegration period for you.
I mean, I think 24 hours, but you're saying 3 days. Okay, I'm going to give that to you.
Yeah, it was 3 days. I think we actually discussed it at one point, but
okay,
it was like official.
And that was because it was very hard for me to have you gone. Emotionally, physically, spiritually.
For all the reasons.
So hard for me.
Yeah.
So I just had to basically say you were dead.
Yes. So that's the dip. So let's just start there because I am away working, which seems super sexy when you're on Instagram and all those things, which is great. That's awesome. It's whatever. But for you, which I don't know if is like normal for every person or if it's like a girl thing, a woman thing. I don't know what it is, but it's for you. It's like, if I'm gone, I don't exist. It's just easier for you to be like, and you're dead.
I think that's a personality.
Okay.
And a defense mechanism for sure.
Okay.
For me, because I definitely carry this feeling that I'm always going to be abandoned. I'm just waiting for it at all times. I'm on edge, like, okay, when are you going to abandon me? Everyone, right? When you're not here, that gets deeply triggered in me. So I'm immediately feeling abandoned. And here's the thing, like you would think, because I cognitively know that I would be able to somehow wash it away and not have to deal with it. Now, what I can say is I cognitively know that and I'm aware of it and I can process how I'm feeling. So over the years, it's gotten better and better. But that processing, it's this very slow healing process. You know, like a wound doesn't get healed overnight, even though you're like attending to it. And you've got all the Band-Aids and ointments on it. It doesn't heal overnight. Yeah. So that's a process that's taken a very long time that I think has gotten completely better. But what I can say in that is that I don't know that it ever completely goes away. There are people who say that they get healed of things and never touch it again. And I love that for them. I think that's fantastic. And perhaps there are things that I don't even recognize in my own life that I've been healed of and I don't deal with them anymore because I'm not dealing with them anymore.
Yeah, makes sense.
Deeper rooted things, abandonment is probably my core insecurity, my core trauma is rooted in that. I don't know that you can ever completely get away from it. So every time you travel, even now I'll be prepared, like, okay, I'm going to feel this. The sting is slightly there, less and less, but slightly there. All of that's a long version to say it's gotten better. I don't think we need the 3 days anymore. You come home and I can
but how is it different for you? How is it different for you from now, like experiencing it just this week, like these 2 weeks, versus like when the kids were littler and I was gone with the band and things like that. Can you tell what is different from that time to this time? Like now that the kids are a little bit older, is I guess here's what I'm asking is part of it what you just said, which is the healing of the wound, which is like this slow healing that's never fully gone. It really is to some degree always going to be this deep marking, this thing. Is that just a healing process that's happening, or is it different because the needs are different because of little kids and now teenagers and that whole world? Like what degree does each of those things play? Do you know, like in terms of
well,
travel?
absolutely all of it, right? So my world has changed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sleep deprived. Can we just take a moment of silence for sleep? Really, I'm not kidding. Like, there is something profound about getting enough sleep.
And for all of you that have young kids, we just recognize you're not sleeping, and so give yourself a little more grace.
It's impossible, but it's a 2-person job, I think.
Absolutely.
Dads nowadays are this new breed of father that gets up with kids in the morning and in the middle of the night and is way more involved than even happened
even when we were had
in the last decade. I feel like I'm just shocked how many people I hear, oh, my husband gets up in the morning with the kids, or so that's fantastic. Women especially need sleep, I think, more than men. So please let your wives sleep. I would say if you feel like your life is off the rails, you're feeling dysregulated, you're feeling anxiety, anything that you're feeling in your life, step 1, what is your sleep schedule like?
Yeah.
It's so stupid. People don't want to do it. But the truth is there's no amount of therapy. There is no amount of medication, exercise, and eating well that is going to fix that is going to have the same ramifications of getting enough sleep is on your life. So PSA, starting today, figure out how to get the right amount of sleep.
So a lot of this, you're saying, like with the kids stuff, it was that the needs were so high when the kids were young, so little sleep, so much going on. Like that, did that play? It's just
because I felt abandoned.
Dynamics.
So it's like, okay, not only am I personally abandoned in my own little life, I'm abandoned as a mother with kids, right? So I don't have the support I need to be able to take care of these kids, which led me to feel very hopeless. Like, this is an impossible job that I have to do. I've got 3 kids and this feels impossible. So I'm abandoned in my own world and I'm isolated because I couldn't even get out. You know, as a young mom, you have 3 little kids. If you're lucky to get to the grocery store and home, and then you're like, why did I go to the grocery store? It was just so much harder, you know? So there's that. So we have all of that contributing along with the fact that I didn't have the awareness that I have now, that I was actually dealing with a lot more emotionally than just you being gone. I was emotionally dealing with my own trauma as well, and my own set of beliefs that, see, I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be abandoned. Nobody's going to care about me. I'm out here on my own doing this impossible task. Wow. And my mode is to then shut down. I think it's also important, I think, to know and understand, what do you do when you're faced with a trigger? When you're feeling you're saying you're saying that people should pay attention to what their go-to mechanisms are for dealing with their triggers. Absolutely. I didn't know at that time to go, oh, I've put up a wall.
Yeah.
And that wall was there to protect me and against you and anything else that could really help me, which is self-defeating, but that's what we do. Right. And not everyone does that. Everyone has a different.
Right. It's really just about paying attention to what your default setting is for when you get triggered, or when you get hurt, or when you're scared, or when you're all those things.
Right. So I understand that now. So a little bit easier. Don't have the kids. I sleep at night. Yeah. I am aware. And so now when you come home, I don't think I have to shut you out for 3 days anymore. We can jump right back in. So praise God for you. Like, wow, babe.
That's
Isn't that nice? You don't have to deal with that anymore.
No,
Because you're coming home. Because here's the thing. You're coming home from a trip where you're needing to reconnect because you were feeling very alone while traveling, and you're putting yourself out there every night.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go out and do your ministry, you're pouring everything out. You're always the guy who's like the last one to leave. You'll pray for everybody. You really want to be intentional and engaging. And that comes at a cost. Yeah. There's a cost to your body for that. So you're coming home wanting then for me to come in and fill up those places in you. Right. And instead of being able to do that, I'm like, hey, get away from me because you just hurt me deeply and now you're the bad guy.
Wow.
That is a crossroads for major marital dysfunction. And we lived in it for a long time.
Yeah, I guess that what that brings up for me, I guess just saying it like that, it's so hard because we have so many people that are attempting to be traveling itinerant, missionary, pastor, prophet, preacher, worship leader thing. Like this is like an actual thing that we're trying to raise up. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that people are trying to raise up, not us in particularly, but this type of job or career that puts people in this situation. And there's no real training for the relational aspects of what that looks like, whether we agree with that being a job or not, or that being, somebody can become a professional Christian, and all those things. There is a reality that no one's really being set up for success when it comes to how to connect with your wife, how to connect with your family, and knowing, because I think a big part of that, I guess when you're saying all that, a major part of that kind of gets, that we haven't talked about yet with that, is the fact that it's because it's ministry, it's deeply connected to God and God's calling, and the fact that it's like, well, if I say no to my husband, or I'm actually saying, hey, we need to put limits on this, or hey, we need to readdress this, that you're actually questioning that as a wife. It can feel as if you're questioning not just your husband and the schedule, but questioning God himself and God's desire for this person you love.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I know that there was many times, and probably many people who aren't doing full-time ministry, but have a view into that world. Yeah. And there's so much glamour around it. You feel like, gosh, if I'm not in that circle, if I'm not the one preaching the message, laying the hands on the people in the front row, leading the songs, my value is greatly, A, diminished, and B, there's this zealous desire to do God's work. So it's very complicated because absolutely there's ego in it. Who doesn't want a pat on the back and to be told that you're the greatest Christian? Yeah. And wow, like you are the embodiment of Jesus. What's a better compliment if you're a Christian? That's the best one. And the only way you get that compliment is by being the one on the stage. So when you're not the one on the stage, but you have a front row seat to the one on the stage, how could there not be an element of jealousy but it's an odd jealousy because it comes across as zeal.
Are you saying jealousy from like the spouse, or are you just saying from any person who's just watching this from the outside?
From any person, right? Yeah. A spouse is, if you are half of a team, half of a ministry team, right? Yeah. Then you really get that. But I think there's also a lot of people who just have a front row. Yeah.
They're watching this happen. What's so interesting to me.
They're in the ministry school, but they're the ones in the back row, or the ones who are not getting highlighted right now. That's a hard position to be in. Oh gosh. Oh, I was at this meeting one time. I shouldn't say these things. We were at this meeting one time. And the big deal superstar Christian in the front was saying, like there shouldn't be any jealousy. Like there's just certain people that God highlights in a season. And so they get risen up. And they were talking about in their ministry, certain people get quote unquote risen up. And that's just because God's highlighting them. And I thought, BS. How am I supposed to feel if I'm always the one in the back row who God never highlights.
Right. Well, there's not a stage for you. There's not a platform for
Right,
you.
'cause
There's
I-
not a
right.
highlight for you. There's no,
Because by highlighting, when God's highlighting me, that means I'm the leader person who gets to get a spotlight shown on my life.
Well, yeah, I
and
get the
not
platform.
I get the platform.
Yeah.
Not everyone's made for the platform. Why is that?
Why is that the highlight?
Right. So that means I'm less than, because I'm never
Yeah.
going to be on the platform because I'm not a platform person.
Yeah. So that it's really what we're doing is so much of our non-language, like we're not intending to communicate a lot of these things. And it ends up being communicated through our like lack of ability to really understand what's even happening in our own lives, which is we're saying, hey, this is really important, really valuable, really, really important to God, and actually means I'm a little bit better than you at being a Christian, which is why I have this right now. And maybe it'll be your turn sometime, as if that is the value system. I said it a bunch of times, is like the greatest, we only put like finished testimonies on the stage. This is the person that got healed. This is the person that got saved. This is the person who did this really cool exploit, went on this missions trip, did this thing, whatever. And what the greatest test that we like highlight those as like the best testimonies in the room, where the greatest testimony in the room is actually the guy in the background who works 60 hours a week, still shows up to church, still loves his family, radically loves God, serves on the worship team, only has enough time to show up to the one meeting and the one thing. And he still does it faithfully, even though he's super tired and actually just basically is just getting by. He's not less important, less valuable, less highlighted. That is the most important testimony in the room. And in all honesty, it's just not sexy enough to put on a platform, nor do I think it even belongs on a platform. But the problem is we keep saying these things do, and it builds a success model that is actually unsustainable by an average human being who really, really loves Jesus.
Well, and that's what I have seen happen time and time again with the people who I've interacted with. It's like you have two paths that I see play out. One is you get quote unquote highlighted by God, which is really not what's happening.
Language. Yeah, it's
no one's highlighting
language.
you. You just worked out well in the structure of that system.
Yeah.
And you were the right peg for that hole. Had nothing to do with God highlighting you.
Yeah.
So you either get quote unquote highlighted, and that's great. So you're really happy with church, you're really happy with the system and the organization, or you give up and you go, oh, okay, I guess God, I'm never going to be chosen. I'm never going to, and it's not chosen by who the leader is. Really, it feels like I will never be chosen by God.
Yeah. And that's really where wouldn't you say that's really where the breakdown happens? Even people who are communicating, I was hurt by the church. Do you think that there's some degree where they're really just communicating, the church made me feel like I wasn't chosen by God? Really, that's the disconnect. It's one thing to feel like, it's almost like it's one thing to feel rejected by a person, but it's a whole other thing when that person represents God and that system that you're trying to fit into and be approved of by represents God to the world. And that's where it starts to kind of dysfunctionally fall apart, because I'm seeing all these things connected to an image of God that's now rejecting me.
So you have to begin to reconcile that. And I see so many people in my world having to reconcile, okay, I'm never going to be the chosen one. So how do I feel about a God who will never choose me?
And we're saying chosen based on platform and opportunity and ministry opportunity. That's what's so insane.
And that's how the structure has been set up.
Yes. And I think like that's what makes this stuff so difficult, watching it sort of play out. And even like, I don't even know necessarily how to reconcile it. And we're talking about all this based on a lot of this ends up what I am a part of. It's what we're a part of. It's the systems and structures we're in, which I think goes back to,
here's the ironic part. It is, right?
Yeah.
I feel so on the outside of that move. Even though you are in it, you do this, you minister, you travel, you do all of that stuff. And I get to be in those spaces frequently. I feel extremely on the outside. And I don't at all say that to, pity party for me. I say that because I go, if I feel that way, everyone's feeling that way.
Yeah.
There's a mass group of people sitting on what seems like the inside of the church, feeling like they're fringe, and it's causing them to have deep warring about their relationship with God and where they stand. And I don't know that it's a bad thing. To some degree, I think anyone who feels that warring, where do I stand? I think, wow. And at least this is my personal journey.
Yeah.
Okay, this is my opportunity to make it real. It's you and me in this war, God. I'm not fighting the church. I'm not fighting anybody else. I'm not fighting you, my husband.
Yeah.
And in some seasons of my life, it felt that way, because it's like there's only so much space under the light, of God's presence. Only so many of us can fit under that light. So you're taking up my space, and anybody else on that platform is taking up my space. So you have to have a little bit of animosity, right? Like, that you're taking up part of what could be my room, my space. What an opportunity. I think. What an opportunity if you can go in and go, okay, this war inside of me is between me and God, and I'm going to wrestle it out.
Well, even that language is so terrible. It's like there's only so much room only under the light of his presence or his spotlight, which is so the opposite of reality. But that's what the system reproduces, and that's the language that actually comes out of it. Like, wow, these people actually, because just on a real practical level, let's just say it's Sunday services. Well, there's only so many services. There's only so many people that can play guitar, so many people that can sing, so many people that can share, so many people that can pray. And so it's like, there's this whole thing that feels like that is God's presence. Right. That is the highlight of his presence. That is those things. And I'm like, man, it's just so devastating, especially because and again, we benefited highly from the system and the structure and the stuff. Like, I'm not opposed to the church existing as it exists. We just have to recognize it for what it is. We can't just blindly go into it and pretend like this stuff isn't happening.
I think, that's what I was trying to say. This is an opportunity. Any place in your life where you feel in opposition, or you feel that you are being pressed into the darkness, pressed into the question, pressed into what's hard and painful, is an opportunity. I don't say any of this to place blame on the church or even the people who are preaching what I would say is pretty awful messages about being chosen by God. I'm accountable to my journey, and I'm accountable to what I do in those positions. I can spend, we're spending a lot of time here talking about this on this podcast, but I hope the fruit of that is anybody else or somebody else recognizing, oh, that's me, and I do feel that way. Don't all that bitterness, frustration that you feel at the church, turn that inward to how do I take that directly to God? Don't be frustrated at the church. If you want to have a war with anybody, go wrestle with Jesus.
Right.
Wrestle him out. See what he has to say.
Yeah. You
are wasting your time being mad at the church. And that's what, that crossroads that I say, like, either you're going to make it, you're going to be the lead pastor, the head worship leader, the lead of the greeting team, whatever it is, or you're going to find your way slowly to the back of the church and feel rejected and then bittered. And I find so many people who are so upset at the church. Yeah. And I say, take all that frustration and put it on God. Because I know that he will speak to you, because I know if you really press into him, you will find an answer.
Right.
And nobody wants to say that, because it's like, oh God, but then what if God doesn't show? I always tell people, no, get angry at God, get frustrated at him.
Absolutely.
See if he really is who he is.
Yeah. If you can't beat on his chest, he really isn't God. If you can't take that from you, there's not much of a God there.
Absolutely. Because you know what? The church can't take it. The church, it's never going to respond to you in a way that makes you walk away feeling satisfied. They will never be able, your pastor.
Well, it doesn't even matter. That's relational. That's just relational anywhere. That's a business. That's a job. That's an investment. That's a relationship. Like anywhere, you're not going to get the fullness of what you made out in your head. You actually are responsible for what you put into that relationship and for what you get out of it. Whether or not it works out the way you thought or the way that you wish it would have, or it's going to have to look different. I'm accountable for me. Right. I'm accountable for my part in this relationship. And if this relationship isn't working out for me right now, outside of a marriage relationship, I can actually go build other friendships. I can actually go build other places. And that's not necessarily a terrible thing unless you're cyclically doing it and you're caught in a cycle where you're not taking any accountability for the part you're playing. That's when it starts to become really dysfunctional because I'm not owning the part that I play.
Well, and I would say, you know what makes the relationship between you and I weighty is that I fight it out with you. You know, we're talking about my little abandonment issues and stoning you out for times and all these things. We fought that out.
Yeah.
We have really fought that out. Face to face fought that out. So you want a weighty relationship with the Lord? Fight it out with him.
So interesting. I just heard this. I don't remember who said it, but they talked about the difference between conflict and confronting. And confront means that you're going to face one another. You actually come together face to face and actually deal with it. Conflict is where I don't even look at you. I don't care. My job is to win. Where if I confront you, I actually go front to front, face to face, and we actually do this thing out. And I like that language. I'm like, yeah, dude, like we need more healthy confrontation in probably all of our relationships. Most people get away with the stuff they get away with. We keep using church as an example, but again, this could be anywhere. Most of the people get away with things that we disagree with because nobody's confronting anyone, mostly in a healthy way, to be able to like, hey man, that's not okay. Like a lot of that is masculine energy that's been completely removed from a lot of these systems where it's like super more romanticized instead of like actually going into battle for stuff that matters. And we've lost a lot of that masculine energy that says, hey, like this isn't okay. You know, even when a woman does it, that's them really tapping into sort of that masculine energy inside of them to go like, hey, this is not okay. We're not going to do this. Like that, the way you treated me or the way that this went down, that actually isn't correct. Can we talk about that? You know, and I've seen when I do that inside of a lot of the meetings that I do it in where, you know, I've had that a lot recently where I'm running into men where I'm like, hey, I'm confronting this thing. And they're like, I don't like you. And I'm like, wow, I'm really glad you can say that. And then we can spend the time wrestling it out. 45 minutes later, every single time, they're like, another man's never done that for me before. Well, of course not, because they're worried about losing their platform, losing their paycheck, losing some degree of favor or influence that isn't real anyway. And then we stand our ground, go, hey, that's not okay. Here's what I believe. Here's what we're fighting for. And then you get to make a decision whether or not you want to participate in a relationship in the future. That's okay. And we've done the work because we're in a committed lifelong relationship to where now when we do that type of confrontation, hey, the way you treated me isn't okay. Hey, I need this. Hey, we need to deal with this. All of a sudden, it's like the safety of us being able to do that in a relationship that's covenantal is way different. I tell people all the time when we're dealing with marriage stuff, it's like, what kind of conversations would you actually have in your marriage if you were fully convinced that the other person wasn't going to leave, regardless of how it went down, regardless of what you had to say, regardless of what you wanted to bring up? What would you actually discuss if you knew the other person was never going to leave regardless? Like that is a type of safety in relationship that you're not going to get anywhere else on planet Earth. It just doesn't work that way.
Well, and we're never told that we can have that relationship with God.
Yeah, because now if I'm not, you're right, because now if I'm not getting that with God, I can't even bring up my dark, deep, sucky, awful, angry, disappointed, disillusioned stuff to God. Well, I'm never bringing that up to anyone else on planet Earth, let alone my spouse.
Well, I think that's why we get so angry at the church, because it's like, oh, you're a physical formed person. I could be mad at you. You are the one who wronged me. When really, I think who we're actually upset with it is God.
Well,
and that's why people end up leaving the church and they leave God too.
Well, and I think that there's a degree to which, like, I think there's that King's Warriors, Magician Lover book that talks about, like, societally, governmentally, spiritually, there were places for us to go. Like, I have a crown, but I haven't grown into it yet. So every little boy and little girl's born with this crown on their heads that's just too big for them. So what we do is we psychologically and spiritually, religiously, all these things, we actually hand it to someone who's big enough to carry it for us. That used to be, actual monarchies where we'd be like, wow, there's a degree of character, there's a degree of integrity, there's a degree of lineage, family honor that we go, you can hold my crown until I get big enough to hold it. We moved that to the church. We moved it to like this realm of influence in religion where we're like, well, you can hold my crown because you have integrity, you have sacrifice, you're doing these things. And now when our governmental leaders have no character, no integrity, and we're really debating whether or not anyone in the church has integrity or character and is going to actually just choose God regardless of the cost. And we're going like, as long as it doesn't, as long as it fits their agenda, we're still going like, I don't know where to put my crown. Mm-hmm. And so we're all just these kids holding these things we don't even know if we're ready to wear. And like when somebody like in culture, like a religious institution or a governmental institution can't handle the weight of that, we're honestly pissed. So we have a right to be a little upset. We have a right to be angry, but we don't know what to do with it. And if we could bring that first to God, then we could find actually relevant places to deal with it and regulate it in our own bodies and our own stories. But we don't even have that place even done yet. And we have nowhere to put these crowns,
Right. So we're walking around super upset.
Super frustrated.
Victims of the church. You know what I want to talk about that just has nothing to do.
Yeah. But I'm like, that's that reality of being that probably does need to be brought up, because that reality of playing out, of being a victim everywhere you go isn't helpful for anyone involved.
No. Okay. This is what I can't help it. I just have to say what I think, right? Or, this just incited a riot in me.
Just don't get too specific.
I won't be specific. If you know, you know. I was on trolling.
Trolling social media.
Social media. And I came across a post of, and there's a documentary, a very well documented story.
Stuff other places. This happens in the church a lot.
A big church in the world.
Yeah. But you found something specific.
This is why I married you. You're just going to hold me back. But
I am.
Which is good. I like to just say everything. I've no lid on my id, as they say.
It's good.
Anyways, of somebody who got really hurt by a leader, one of their church leaders. And they went on a tirade for 10 minutes on social media, how they were victims of this particular pastor, whom I am not one to sit around and try to defend any pastor, it's right? So this is not me trying to defend somebody. No. What upset me about that post deeply, like I had to call, you were out of town. So of course I had to call my best friend Amanda and talk to her for 20 minutes to just cool off, because you are not a victim of somebody's bad behavior. Number one, abuse is a horrific thing that really happens to people all across the world, particularly young children. Primarily young children are experiencing abuse all across the world. So to throw the word abuse out there,
which is what they did,
is to dishonor the story of someone who has actually been physically abused. That's my feelings about it. I'm sure everyone can have. I'm sure that would be upsetting for somebody to hear. But that's how I feel. Because I know people who have actually been physically, sexually, emotionally abused as children. Right. So as a grown man, to throw that around because somebody had bad behavior around you, I feel like strike one. We don't do that. Mm-hmm. That is very offensive. Number two, if you are in an adult relationship where someone is treating you poorly, get out. You have free will, and in a free country, get out.
You don't have to stay.
You don't have to stay. Number 2, don't go putting that on social media. As if, to me, I thought, wow, you just ripped up your man card. Again, I'm saying all kinds of things that are probably just horrible to say, but that's how I felt about it. I thought, oh my God, I would be mortified if my husband went up and ripped his man card up because he wasn't manly enough to walk away from a pastor. And instead, I thought, you know what would have been the appropriate way to handle that is to go, hey, I messed up. I was in a relationship that with a pastor or a leader or a boss that was not healthy, and he had bad behavior.
Right.
Because that's all that was presented from this person, was that this particular pastor / boss had some bad behavior.
Right.
So cool. Then let's work that out. And what would be helpful is to tell, like, hey, let me tell you the tools I learned about how to deal with your own trauma from bad behavior. Right. Like, I learned that I needed to work on this. I needed to stand up for myself more. And here's some tools for how to stand up for yourself more.
Right. And I think the big thing is, like, let's define it a little clearer too. Cause it's like reality is that just because a person has a position in a religious institution, a position, let's just make this very clear. A person in a position of authority in a spiritual or religious institution does not necessarily make them a person that is trustworthy or a person of character or integrity. And it most certainly does not mean they're always going to act appropriately. So they are going to have bad behavior. Now, if you put your life in direct influence under that person, you still have to be an adult. You still have to be a grown adult and deal with what is handed to you. Not what you wish was happening, but what is actually happening. If you're not getting paid enough, you don't like the hours, you don't like the way the person's talking, you get to say that to them. We are talking about, like, the reality that in any institution you find yourself in, but especially religious institutions, just because someone is behaving in a way that you don't like, you don't have to yield to them just because of their position. They are not correct. And then if you stay there, you then therefore do not get the right to call it abuse. You don't get to call it abuse because you didn't have enough insight to be able to see it and be able to call it out or remove yourself from that position when it was appropriate.
Right. Well,
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I guess
I'm trying to define it because I do want to say that there are times where people are being spiritually abused. They are being, like, lorded over and being pushed around and being manipulated and coerced and being forced upon in religious situations. And
I would say
different.
and I guess this is the part that's so frustrating for me in the current culture we live in.
Right.
There's probably 0.05% of people who could fall under that, because you're absolutely right. That is real.
Yeah.
There are people in very spiritually abusive situations.
Right.
Absolutely. Very few. Very few. So to come out and say that that's your story, I mean, you better really know what you're talking about to say that publicly about another person, number one.
Right.
Number two, we have to stop playing the victim.
That's
You
huge.
are not the victim of your life. You are not the victim of the church. You're not the victim of your home, the victim of your spouse, the victim of your friends and your jobs. Again, not to say that there is absolutely a percentage of people who have been victimized.
Absolutely.
Very small percentage, and I don't want to diminish the reality of that. Most people haven't. Most people cannot claim that as their experience. And the damage that you're doing is to yourself and to the people around you, to allow them to not deal with what's happening in their life, but to lay down and die. I can't. I was just the victim. I'm going to lay down and die now. You know what? And this is the thing I've seen. People who in my experience, where I have seen people who have really been victims of extreme things in their life, those are the first ones to stand up They're the first ones who to not say they're victims, to say, oh, that's the story I hear of people who I've seen. Wow, I cannot believe what you've overcome. Those are overcomers.
Yeah.
And shouldn't that be what we're celebrating instead of celebrating victimhood, that things didn't go my way and people weren't nice to me.
Right. And we end up, listen, like, I think it just needs to be said, like, we're not professionals. We are not counselors. We are not psychologists. We don't have doctorates. We are giving you our opinion from our experience. And what we've experienced from our end is a lot of people who end up making themselves victims to their own story so that it's an excuse, it's justification to never move forward in real power and real authority with what they were given. You have a story, and that story has redemptive value in it somewhere if that's what you're looking for. If you're not looking for that, you will find yourself a victim. You will lay down and die, and you will blame everyone else instead of taking responsibility for your life. Honestly, some of the best, like, when you're dealing with some of the guys who are like the best therapists in the world, these guys are like, the job is to get you to a place where you're no longer a victim and you can take responsibility for the most broken places in your story. That's good therapy. That's good counseling. That's good coaching. My job is not to get you to wallow in the thing that hurts you. Our goal is to get you to identify what hurts you so that you don't repeat that pattern in your life. And that way you can make that thing that you got hurt by, that person you got hurt by, that situation, that circumstance, that system that you were a part of that hurts you, actually has redemptive value in it and can make you stronger if that's what you're looking for. If that's not what you're looking for, you will find yourself a victim every single time. And we live in a culture where everybody's a freaking victim now, which means I deserve rights. I deserve this. You should only be able to talk to me about this way, and you should only be able to talk to me if you use these words and these things and this stuff, only because I'm a victim of my own life.
Right.
And we have to, especially, like, I know we talk about this a ton. Women, yes, amen. Men, you have to be the starter of this. Men have to stand up and go, enough is enough. I'm not a victim of my life. I was hurt. I went through some stuff. I don't really want to talk. I'm not prepared to talk about some of it yet. There are things in my life that's kind of off limits right now. Here's the 3 things I am willing to talk about. And then when the door opens to the other 10, we'll get to that. But for now, this is as far as I can go. But I'm not going to be a victim to it anymore. And I'm not going to let my life be defined by the things that have hurt me. Because at the end of the day, that's a spiral you can't get out of. If you're a victim in this situation, you're going to make yourself a victim here and here and here and here, with my wife, with my kids, with my life, with my job, with my spirituality, with my faith, with God. Ultimately, it all spirals back to God. It's his fault. It's his thing. So I'm breaking relationship with God, which is no help to anyone. The truth is that your suffering actually does produce character if you're willing to subject yourself, if you're willing to submit yourself to the process of actually working with and engaging with the story you have, not the story you wish you had. And I do believe, and in my opinion, men have to go first. Like, this isn't an option for men to be like, well, I just really was treated poorly and I need to be compensated for that emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially, whatever it is. It's like, no, bull crap, man. You just need to get off your high horse and you need to do the work. And I don't care what it costs you. You have to do the work. And the first, I don't know. And again, this may not be fair and I'm not a professional. So I don't know what's right or wrong. I don't know what I'm saying half the time. But I will say that at some point, if you're going to break the cycle of being a victim in your own life, you have to own the fact that something in you puts yourself in that position in the first place.
Yeah.
Now again, we are not talking about kids being abused by their parents. They were born into houses. We're not talking about real, actual abuse victimization. Okay,
I'm talking, this is in the realm of, I was actually treated poorly.
I was treated poorly by someone had bad behavior and I was within the affected area of their bad behavior. Mm-hmm. I was in the drop zone of their bad behavior and it affected me.
Right.
Got it. So just so we're clear on what we're discussing. You put yourself there you chose that. What in you chose to be there as a man? I'm talking specifically to men right now, because you have to own your crap. Like, the very first thing we teach men in the fight stuff and in all the fight, like, resources that we have, You have to own your crap. So you got to be honest, and then you got to take responsibility for your crap. So I got to be honest about the fact that I was hurt by this. This person hurt me. This situation, this system, this institution hurt me. Okay. I can't change them. And any amount of social media posting about how terrible this person is not going to fix that. If anything, it's going to solidify their behavior because you look foolish. The big thing I can do is look in the mirror at my own life and go, why did I choose to put myself in that situation? What in my story caused me to repeat a pattern I've been in before? Because if you follow the thread, you've probably been there before. What in my story allowed me to subject myself to this type of bad behavior and be okay with it? What did I want to get out of it? If it would have worked out this way, would I be complaining at all? If I was still doing XYZ with this person or had this influence with this person, would I be upset? Okay, well, so now I'm only upset because I didn't get the influence. I didn't get the money. I didn't get the thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a big part of my story I need to pay attention to, because that thing that I'm claiming I'm missing out on actually gives me more identity than where I am right now. So now I don't know who I am, and that I'm being robbed of identity through this simple act. I need to know where that started in my life. Where did that happen? And men, we don't get a choice. Like this is the work we have to do as men. If we're going to, not just for identity and, confidence in our own courage in our own life, but if we're going to lead our house, we're going to lead our kids. Like, we better be well aware of that stuff and be able to do the work necessary to get through it to get through it, not get over it. There is no version of this where you get over it. Somewhere in there's real pain. And the whole verse, like that we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, there's no getting over it. We go through it. Mm-hmm. So there's a real death. So even this guy even the thing we're talking about, there's real pain there. Mm-hmm. So I can identify that's painful, but your reasoning is wrong. The reasoning is wrong.
Well, and your actions are inappropriate.
If you're a man, yes.
Well, I would hope a woman wouldn't do
I
that
agree,
either.
but we're dealing
And
with
this
that.
is why I say that, because I think the circle of what you're talking about is complete when we tell the truth. We accept our story. We know our story.
Yep.
We learn from our mistakes. We have awareness of who we are. And then the last step is when then we can give away good advice. When we can give away of ourselves goodness on, let me tell you how to avoid pitfalls. Right. And that doesn't mean that everyone has to go around giving advice. We give advice by living our lives.
Yeah,
we are an example,
daily, yeah.
Right? But if you do choose to get on a platform, probably don't make that the story of your victimhood that's somebody else's fault that you take no ownership over. Right. How much greater is it to tell a story? And I do not think that story has to have a victorious cap at the end or period at the end at all, because we are all works in process at the whole time. But what I do think is it doesn't end with, and it's your fault, and I did nothing wrong, and I'm a victim. Mm-hmm. That is telling a world, especially if you are a person like this person was, who had, it seemed, I didn't know them, but it seemed that they had a little bit of an influence on social media. And I would imagine there's a percentage of that influence is young, influential people. And the story that you're telling them is that it's okay. You're probably just a victim. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. You're just a victim. Lay down and die. It's a terrible message to put out there into the world, especially if you have any type of influence. And in all reality, I don't care who you are, you're influencing somebody.
Yeah. I just think, especially just fighting for men, I'm like, men, we have to do a better job of owning our crap. We can't blame, you can't blame your spouse. You can't blame the church. You can't blame your leader. You can't blame, it's like, if you're a grown man, you can't blame your daddy anymore. You can't blame your uncle. Like, at some point, you're just going to have to own it. As sucky as it is, like as terrible and as devastating as your story might be, as a man, you don't get to do that. Like, you have to own your crap.
It just doesn't work out well for you.
It doesn't work out well for anyone. With now you're repeating the pattern instead of changing it, because you were hurt by the being under the influence of somebody else's bad behavior. Now you're putting people that you're influencing under the influence of your bad behavior, because now you're just repeating the cycle. Because a real man at some point goes, hey, that was really bad. That didn't go well. So here's what I learned. Like you said, here's what I've learned from this experience.
And you take responsibility, own your stuff.
Right.
So in that story, you got to own your stuff. You made some decisions that got you there.
Yep.
And those decisions may have been rooted in trauma, in hardship, and in pain, but they were your decisions that placed you at the footstool of being treated poorly.
Right.
You got to own that.
Listen, I can just tell you this from traveling. I mean, from the way we started this is a lot of this happens, like this conversation is happening because when we travel, we actually do try to figure out how to do family well. There actually is a real cost to figuring out how to do marriage and family and ministry. Ministry is not evil. The church is not evil. Religious institutions are not in and of themselves evil. We wouldn't be sitting on this podcast in the place that we are if we didn't have those places, those people, both good and bad, make up our story. I am still on the road going to churches because I actually still believe in the people who are showing up to church who genuinely want to meet God and are genuinely looking for encounter and presence, and they have no idea where else to go except to those institutions. There is a beauty in that we should be really, really honoring as leaders, regardless of whether your church is 5 people or 5,000. You should be honoring and respecting the reality that people are showing up. They are not there to see you. They've never been there to see you. I don't care how good of a preacher you are, because the moment presence enters the room, they don't care about your preaching anymore, and they don't care about your dumb song. They don't care about any of that, because the moment that they're able to encounter the living God, everything else fades away. And you are a vessel to be able to do that. That has been misused tons of times, and we can keep going over it. But the reality is, if you're sitting in that pew and you're sitting in that seat or you're sitting in that room, you are there because ultimately, hopefully, you're looking to encounter God. And if you're just looking for someone to pat you on the back, then regardless of who that person is, when they do not do it, you will be disappointed, not only with them, but you'll be disappointed with God. And eventually you just be disappointed with yourself, and the whole spiral continues. And I think after being on the road in Germany, I can say in Germany and in Switzerland, and into Prague, which was phenomenal as well, I can genuinely say that there is so many people within the body of Christ who are looking to encounter God. They really just are. And there's really, really good leaders. There is amazing people out there doing amazing things to the best of their ability. All of us are dysfunctional in about 100 ways that we don't even recognize half the time. But I can say we've done two-week tours this year so far, and mostly just going after the fight stuff, trying to let people know what we're doing with marriage and men. And I can say with confidence that 90% of the people that are 95% of the people who are doing this are amazing people. The heart, yes, genuinely amazing, wonderful, God-fearing, God-loving, honest, broken, complicated, figuring it out people from the ages of, in their late 20s, early 30s, all the way to their 50s and 60s, trying to do this thing, been in it for 20, 30 years and been in it for a few years. This is the thing that I would say to cap off the sort of rambling that we've been doing on the church, and is, I would say, number one, that there is beauty in the brokenness of what the church offers the world. There is real beauty there, and I'm watching it. I've seen it over and over again. Real beautiful people really seeking God that are there just for the beauty of Jesus, which is always amazing to me. And the second thing I would say is that we have done a really bad job, I think, as leaders. This is sort of where I think the rubber meets the road for me in this, is that I'm meeting men and women who are doing some of the most amazing things. They're stunningly beautiful. Like, it's really good what they're doing. And they're doing it from this place of purity, this place of deep love for people and for Jesus, and wanting to see the world transformed to his image and all these things, right? In 1,000 different expressions. But here's the problem. Is there ultimately, the system has produced such a poor image of what success looks like that they don't feel like they're doing a good job. And that is really heartbreaking to see people over and over again who are amazing leaders, wonderful families, beautiful children. And they're like, yeah, we're just hoping it grows. We're hoping it's this. We just need this, you know? And it's so sad to watch because I'm like, wow, what you have is so beautiful and you don't even know it because the model we're giving of success in the church is so big and extravagant and hype and all of these things. And they can't even see how stunning the thing I'm literally trying to convince them the thing they're doing is beautiful, that their marriage that they have is actually the most beautiful thing they have. And that what they're doing in the kingdom of God is really stunning with 30 people, 35 people, 100 people. And they're like, yeah, but we're just hoping. And I'm like, for what? And I think going back to, the victimization part, a part of it is that we've given this huge model of success. So the part that I was able to play is just never enough. It's never enough. The place I got to lead or play an instrument or pray, it's just, hopefully it'll be bigger one day. Hopefully it'll be this, which ties back into what you said, which is like, there's this image of success that God's spotlight highlights a few. And if you're not in that, don't worry, maybe one day, if you're a good enough Christian or you pray enough or you fast enough. And none of that's true. It's just not true. And the model of success has to change if we're going to see people actually just live in the life that they were given and not some other version they're hoping to attain one day if they're good enough.
I love that. So true. And I think you don't have to run a church to feel that.
No.
I feel that I have to remind myself constantly that my little offering, my little dirt life is beautiful. The few little people that I get to lead, my children, and the friendships I get to have, they really deeply and profoundly matter.
Yeah.
And what I see, it's so cliche to say because it's funny how sometimes the most cliche things are the most true things.
Always.
Everyone's telling you,
Yeah.
don't compare yourself to what's on Instagram to the point where it feels like, yeah, I know. But it's really...
So true.
It's true. And we're all doing that. And instead of just sitting and appreciating and being grateful for and honoring the contribution that we give, even if it seems and appears to be ever so small.
Well, and the centerpiece of all the work we're doing with the fight, it's just the center, whether it's marriage, men, women, kids, whatever. The centerpiece is you have to just agree with your story. You have to agree with the story you're given. You don't get another story. Like if you're not even willing to just accept that the life you have is the life you were given and that actually is good enough, everything else is not going to work. It's just going to feel out of place. You're just going to keep trying to shove, square pegs into round holes because you don't even agree with the life you've been given,
right?
The story that you have,
I think that we got extremely derailed. We're almost going to need to see, do we even want to release this? Sometimes you just get...
we'll just release it as is. It's fine.
I get a
so
little
just understand,
fired up.
Yeah.
But maybe we close here and we're going to do another podcast on what we wanted to talk about, which was your time away and kind of how that went.
Yeah, we'll get to it eventually. But I hope this was helpful. Please hear our hearts. I
tend to get riled up, and I have been.
Well, I think the big thing is you're listening to the opinion of Jake and Nicci Hamilton, and to some degree, you listen to this because you value that opinion. And if you don't, it's okay. We're not saying we're right in most of this stuff, but I say this constantly, and we can end with this, but it's like our job is on a regular basis not to give you all the right, the exact right information. Our job is to get you to question the way that you're processing what you've experienced in your life in a way that maybe you haven't before. and to question some of the things in your life that you may not have ever even taken a second glance at. And if we can get you to leave these podcasts with more questions than answers, then really we've done our job, you know? And if your goal at the end of this is just to disagree with us and not to ask any questions, that's your own ignorance and immaturity, because you can take something from anything.
Or just agree, right? I think we
do not
best
want you
thing
to just
you can
agree.
do in life is search it out for yourself.
That's it.
And
Search
that's
it out.
that.